You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, this episode of the Silicon Alley Podcast is a special one, is the sister episode to last week's episode number 53, which was Talking is Easy, Podcasting is Hard. And that one and this one are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Silicon Alley being on the airwaves or internet waves, I guess Wi-Fi, however you listen to this podcast. And so this week, I want to share an update on where the fintech company, Ostrich, that I am building with Andrew Holliday stands today and some of the lessons that we've learned and what are some of our key areas have been these last couple of months. You're going to walk away with some actionable steps that you can apply in your own business. And I'm going to tell some stories from some of the funny things that have happened to us along the way and some of the things that have helped inspire us and how we're actively implementing different things that we're learning along the way. And so before we dive into this episode, for those that are not familiar, Ostrich is a fintech company with a free mobile app that has game-like social challenges that help you build strong money habits. You can compete against yourself, your friends, or strangers as you achieve your financial goals. So you can think of it as a almost Fitbit or Strava for finance. Think saving with friends, investing with friends. And so our overarching mission is to improve global financial well-being and help you achieve your financial dreams. It's time for you to get your head out of the sand. And so a couple of things that we're doing that I've talked about previously, but I think it's important to highlight that's a little different than what's out there in the marketplace is that we aren't linking to your bank account. So we're not touching your private secure banking data, like that's yours. We're focused on the habit building. The second is we're not a financial services company. So I don't want you to put your money with us, right? That's not what we want to do. Our goal is to help improve your relationship with money and help you build those habits that you need to ultimately achieve your financial dreams. And so we've consciously made the decision not to do those two things because we don't believe that any company that does that can truly be aligned with your interest as a consumer and its best interest. And so that's kind of our ethos and why we've done what we've done up to this stage. With that intro, let's actually get into some of the lessons learned and what's been going on the last couple months. So for anyone that has ever built or grown a company, you probably already know this, but your team is your most important asset, right? It's not your product or service, but it's actually the people involved in building your company. And so lesson number one over these last couple of months has been on growing our team. And this has become abundantly clear that it's a big focus for us the past few months as we are preparing to launch our public beta for the application. And, I've mentioned this in the past, but our team is small. So Andrew and I are the only full-time folks at this point. And so that means the two of us have been in charge of everything, right? From building the website to the product to the marketing and creating social content, writing our newsletters, building out the decks, structuring our referral programs, engaging with users, going to conferences, talking to investors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's just so many things that you have to get done in order to build a business from scratch. And so as you get started, you start to add more and more to your own plate. And, it becomes a challenge to do everything well. And so one of the obvious things that I've not been shy about and have been very, very clear with everyone on this podcast is that neither Andrew or I are engineers by training, which means that some of the slowest progress that we've had has been around the product and on the product front. And so to get to the point where we are today with the product about an inch away from public testing, it's been a big uphill battle. It's not easy doing something the first time, right? So again, first time building a product, not engineers by nature. And so we've made a lot of mistakes along the way that have slowed us down. But what's also become really clear over the past couple months is that we've sort of reached the limits of our abilities with these no-code tools that we currently have in place. So about a month and a half ago, it started taking me weeks to get things done that a skilled engineer could do in about a day, right? And as soon as I'd solve one problem, we'd run into another one that would take another couple of weeks for us to get sorted. And so that became sort of the cycle. And so we've been using a system called OKRs. And for those in the tech world, you're probably familiar, but for those that aren't, OKRs just stands for objectives and key results. It's a framework for goal setting or in this case, obviously objectives, that allows you to more easily track progress and align those objectives and goals with the actual outcomes you're trying to drive. And so typically OKRs are done on a quarterly basis. But for us, being a small team and having, wanting to iterate quickly, that felt like a too long of a time horizon. So for us, we use OKRs based on 6-week time intervals, which actually is what helped us identify this problem sooner rather than later. And so after seeing the same OKRs for a product pop up with very little progress, pop up over and over again as we went to go craft them for the next 6 weeks period, it became clear we had to do something different, right? That definition of insanity is do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Well, if we keep down the path that we'd been down, we would be that definition of insanity. And so we hit that breaking point. And part of it was the amount of time that I was spending learning something new. Like that time would be better served finding someone that already had that skill set, and then freeing up my time to go focus on other areas of the business that would be more impactful, or working on just different areas of the product that I could work on. But the challenge was that some of the key features that we need to make sure that we get the public beta ready to go just weren't there. And that was out of my purview. And so again, that's the challenge with a small team, is you have to wear multiple hats. And that when you spend an inordinate amount of time in one area, there's an opportunity cost for all the other areas that you could be spending your time. And so about 2 weeks ago, we made the decision to bring someone on board part-time to help us get that last feature and set of features that we need to really push us across the goal line and be able to actually test this thing in a way that we know has a chance of being successful and giving us the feedback that we need, right? Like we could launch today and we have a product out there, but we would know the big areas that we're going to get feedback from, because we've got to have them. And so that's, why we made that decision. And so just in a few days since we brought on that engineer, we've seen a ton of great progress. So we actually found this engineer through a mutual connection in the no-code community, the builder community that we're using to build Ostrich. I'd seen this individual very active on the forums, and I'd been engaging with them to get feedback. And she actually told me that that she'd been using this engineer to help her sort of do the things that she couldn't do on the back end and some of the more technical things. And I played around with the application that the two of them had kind of built, and it was really, really well done. And so I was really impressed. And so we got that referral, right? So she referred us to this engineer who she'd been working with and contracting. And, again, being able to see that person's actual work firsthand and then having a recommendation allowed us to move quickly through sort of a vetting process and interview process to bring them on to help us get across the finish line. And so, again, we're still early in that process with the new hire, but we can already see that our OKR timelines are actually getting back on track, and we're making progress once again, which I couldn't say the same thing for the last, probably 5 weeks or so. So it's really exciting. And, in addition to being back on track on the product front, we are now able to dedicate more time to some of the other areas that we've neglected around branding and content that align with our overall mission, right? And so when we think about what's really important for Ostrich to be successful, it's one, having a really great product, but two, it's also being able to connect to the people that we know could get value. And we need to have the stickiness, and that part of that comes with the product, but we also need to have the awareness, which is building the brand and engaging with the community of folks that we're building, right? This community that we're building. And so growing your team is extremely, extremely important on this front. But beware, because not every hire can go as smoothly as we've talked about with this first engineer that we've brought on. And so in addition to hiring this one individual, we've opened up 3 other roles. One of them is a permanent sort of a technical leader and co-founder position, right? So someone that's going to be part of the team and really in a really crucial way, a foundational member of the team, a founder, and then 2 marketing interns to help us in a couple areas that we need a little bit of support in. And so I've done interviews in the past, right? Coming from the corporate world and a startup that had a really strong hiring process, I didn't quite grasp how much filtering actually goes into the hiring process. and how difficult it is. So in the past, when I've done interviews, a lot of those candidates have been pre-vetted. They've gone through multiple conversations. And so I was looking for something very specific with someone that I sat down with in my previous lifetimes, and or looking for something like cultural fit, right? Where all of the abilities had already been sort of vetted out. And now it's just like, is this person going to be able to come into the culture and add value to the culture? But when you don't have those pre-qualification measures, hiring is much, much more challenging. And so on the technical lead front, this co-founder role, we've had some strange conversations. And one that really sticks out is a candidate who wrote a very thoughtful message about the problem we're trying to solve and sort of details around strategy. And like, you could tell that they took time on this outreach. But when we got on the call, they sort of sidestepped every question about previous employment or work. They didn't talk about the skill sets that they had. They really shared no details about themselves. And actually, I brought up questions based on their profile, and we've been using AngelList. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but AngelList is a place where you can find jobs and things like that for startups specifically, and typically tech startups. And things on their profile weren't accurate. And it was just honestly one of the strangest calls that I've ever been on, because the conversation, if this person would have like checked off all the other boxes, would have been really solid. Like their thinking was actually really solid, but they wouldn't answer fundamental questions about their background, which was just super strange. And so therefore we had no way of judging or starting to qualify this candidate, right? We can't find anything about them. And it was really frustrating to be on that call for all parties involved, right? The candidate as well as us. Honestly, I'm still a little confused as to who this person really is and why they wanted the role. It was just strange and frustrating for everyone on the call. There's this common saying when it comes to hiring that you should really only hire people that you were genuinely like ecstatic about bringing on board, because it's a lot harder to part ways with someone once they're on the team. And the detriment to bringing on the wrong person versus not being able to fill a role is greater when you hire the wrong person. And so that's sort of what we're struggling through right now, is finding strong candidates who we are truly, truly ecstatic, not just, happy or feel good about, but like ecstatic to bring on board, but also balancing filling those roles quickly, right? Like we need to get the support and build the team quickly. And so that's sort of the challenge when it comes to hiring. And so, as we find a solution that works for us on the vetting front and everything else, I'm happy to share that knowledge with you. But if you've got any recommendations, I would love that. Reach out to me to my podcast email, which is william@financialglass.com. So first name @financialglass.com. And that's the email for the podcast. I'd love to hear best practices and would be happy to share that with our audience as well. So that's really been a major focus for us. So again, if you have any best practices, or anyone that is technical and interested in personal finance, wants to change things at a systemic level, then please connect us. Would love to have a chat with them. Now, the second area of focus for Ostrich these last couple of months, and where we've made a lot of progress as well as learned a lot of things, is on the networking front, right? You hear this all the time, how important networking is, and that, your network is your net worth and things like that. And while I think to a degree, some of that is really true, more so for being able to find the resources that you need or solve problems based on people that you know in your network. When you're first starting something new and building a tech company or some product that's never been built before, your first focus has to be on the product, right? You've got to get the product right. So you end up getting your heads down, you're focused on that product. It's so, so crucial to get that first MVP and that first version right? Because let's face it, if you focus on everything else and you don't really have a quality product, you don't really have much of a business, right? Like think of some of those smokescreen type companies like Theranos or even the Fire Festival, right? It ended up just being a bunch of marketing mumbo jumbo and people beating their chests when there was really nothing behind it. And so one overlooked piece when you get that tunnel vision for your product is that you fail to connect with other entrepreneurs and people in the startup ecosystem that you need to scale your company long-term, right? This is one of the biggest challenges for first-time entrepreneurs and people that don't already have a large network, is being able to connect with the right people. And so Brad Feld and Martin Babnick, who are both successful entrepreneurs and investors and have both been on this podcast, they focus on building startup ecosystems in their own different areas and arenas. And they both have used this term called creative collisions, that are these random meetings of people at events, typically, that lead to just great things. And so the idea is that the more of these sort of creative collisions that happen, the more likely someone is to bump into a future employee, investor, customer, or mentor, someone that they need in order to move their business forward, something that's mutually beneficial. And so increasing the number of creative collisions and having a greater number of those connections happen is what will lead to finding resources for startups to be successful. And so in a micro sense, this is what we've been focusing on, is having these different connections. And right now, obviously, we're in a very unique time with the pandemic and COVID-19, that a lot of the ways that you would normally do this are not available to us in the pandemic, right? We're not able to go to meetups. We're not able to go to conferences. We're not able to go to networking events and actually meet people face to face. So you lose some of those creative collisions that naturally occur when you're in a large group or some of these different meetup events. And so while it's more difficult locally, everything shifted online. And so there's still opportunities to connect with new people, but the format and sort of the etiquette is still sort of being defined, because this is a new for everyone for the most part. And so Andrew and I actually exhibited at our first virtual conference. So Ostrich did its first exhibit last month, and we found the experience to be actually pretty pleasant. On the front end, you essentially load your booth, you get all the materials that you would do in a regular conference ahead of time, right? Except instead of having to have physical things at your booth, it's all virtual, right? So it's a virtual experience with videos that you record, decks, animations, and content that way. The actual content of the conference was pretty solid, right? There were some really good talks and speakers and things that we actually took away and have applied to our own business now. And the one-on-one meetings were really great. So we sort of divided and conquered. So Andrew took over some of the content stuff, and I was focused on meeting with people for the most part. But it was actually really easy to meet with people. You had to do a little research on the front end, so it wasn't quite as naturally creative collisions, but there were other people that we connected with that I would have never searched for, that were sort of these creative collisions, because they searched for me and the profile that we had on there. And it kind of felt a little bit like online speed dating, right? So during this event, we were able to connect with different investor groups, someone from the Techstars New York program who we've been trying to connect with more deeply. So that was really fruitful for us. And even just, a random attendee. I mentioned people that were searching for folks that had our profile, and someone that was just really passionate about personal finance. And so they gave really great feedback on the concept and everything else, and what stood out to them and why they were drawn to Ostrich, and some of the challenges that they've personally had with the other finance apps that are out there, as well as some of the habits and accountability stuff. So it's really great. And, just like you would have in an in-person event, you have the ability to, give your elevator pitch, and you've got to do it really quickly because you have a set amount of time that's, 10, 15 minutes with someone. So just like you would normally get at an actual networking event, right? I was doing my elevator pitch 20 times in a row, right, throughout the day. And so you're still able to build some of those strong connections and get some of the benefits. It's just a little bit different navigating the virtual world. So since then, we've also been looking for other entrepreneurial groups and communities locally that are not big conferences that we can connect with people. And there's one in New York City that's really worth checking out called Founders Friday. That's where, if you were an executive or a founder at a startup, you can connect with other founders, and there's always speakers and content and things like that. And so a big focus for us moving forward is increasing those creative collisions and expanding our network, and helping find people that can help benefit our business, but also where we can help add value to what they're doing as well. The final sort of big area that we've been focusing on and taking a step back on is branding. And it's a key component of any successful consumer-facing business. It's true for B2B as well, but really the consumer-facing business is truly building a strong brand. And Chandra Arora, who was on episode 52 of the podcast called The Fire in Your Belly, he's the CEO and founder of Red Eye Louie's, which is a spirits brand. And that's really his focus as well, right? The equity, as he said, is in the brand, right? That's where the value in what you do is. And there's one company that is used a lot, but I think really highlights this point, and that's Nike. Nike's shoes, if you think about the actual products themselves, they really aren't that different from anything else you can get out on the market, right? They're good quality shoes, but you can get good quality shoes from a lot of different places. But what they've built that people are now wanting to associate themselves with Nike is their brand, right? Their brand is what draws people in. And so you may think that Nike just sells shoes and athletic gear, but what they're really selling is their brand and the feeling that you get when you're wearing Nike products or using Nike products. And so, right, when you rock that swoosh, it says something about your identity and who you are and what you stand for. And so if you look at Nike's actual corporate mission, it's to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Now, there's an asterisk over athlete that says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So what Nike's doing, even just in their brand statement, is one, defining athletes in this inspirational thing, but they're two, also bringing people in by saying, if you have a body, you are an athlete, right? You're moving, everyone's an athlete essentially, right? And so if you look at Nike's commercials, that's what they do, is really focus on that inspiration piece, right? They sell that emotion that comes with it. And yes, it's shoes and shirts and balls and bats and all that kind of stuff too. But they're selling that emotion and that just do it mentality, right? And so I give this Nike example because most people are familiar with Nike, right? And if you go through Nike's history, you can sort of see this trajectory that they've had. And if you do want to dive deeper into Nike history, there's two things that I recommend: Shoe Dog, which is Phil Knight's book that tells the story of Nike, and then Reid Hoffman on his podcast, The Masters of Scale, just did an episode that was on Nike and Phil Knight. Definitely worth listening to. That one's a little shorter than reading, so pick your poison there. But what you see when you look at the Nike story is that they didn't really start to step into their brand until the 1980s, and they've been around for well over a decade. Now, Nike actually didn't start off as Nike. They started off as Blue Ribbon Sports, and they were just a reseller of a Japanese brand shoemaker, and they made Tiger shoes. And it wasn't until Nike got shut out of the distribution deal, right? They started to pick up, and other large distributors saw what Nike was doing and being able to sell these shoes. And then these other larger distributors in the US went and approached the Japanese team and was like, hey, like we want in, but Nike had exclusivity. And so eventually Nike got cut out and they were forced to create their own products. And one of the key things that helped Nike when they made this switch was that they'd been very focused on the quality of the products to begin with. So they were even Bob Bowman, who is a famous track coach who was part of the Nike team early on with Phil Knight, would tinker and create all these different molds and how to make the shoes lighter and do all these different things. And so they had this like obsession with the product. And that actually allowed them to pivot when they did. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the branding that came along with that, right? There's a lot of, as we said, really great quality products out there. And so you have to have that. That's like table stakes, right? Having a quality product is table stakes. If your product isn't quality, you're not going to make it. But just having a quality product doesn't mean you are going to make it. And so they started coming to their own in the 1980s with the Just Do It campaign. You have like Mike, you have all these different things. Nike had always sponsored athletes, but it wasn't until the 1980s that they started really tugging at these emotions and doing advertising in a real programmatic way. And part of Phil Knight's philosophy around that was that he hated traditional advertising, the buy more toothpaste or minty fresh breath or whatever it was, right? He didn't believe in that. So wanted a different approach, which helped them because it was a fresh message that no one had ever heard, right? You were engaging with an audience in a new way that caught people's attention and it resonated with folks. And Nike's continued to do that. As Andrew and I think about Ostrich specifically in the brand we are building, it's important to really focus on our identity and the emotion you feel when you're a part of the Ostrich flock, right? How does being a part of the flock make you feel? Why are you excited and energized to be a part of the flock? Who are our target customers? What type of messaging supports that brand vision and those emotions that we want to drive through every interaction when you interact with our brand and have people be proud to be a member of Ostrich. And so these past months, we took a step back from social media content because what we were putting out really didn't meet our brand expectations, right? If you looked at it, it was go back and look at our old Instagram posts and things like that, or just any social media. It was quotes and articles. And like, those are great, but it doesn't look any different than what other things are already out there on social media. When you look at other financial apps, companies and influencers, what they're putting out, it didn't support our brand vision and what makes us unique and different. And so what we've really done is home in on these branding type questions and developed a framework for engaging with the members of the flock. And so starting on the Sunday, 22nd November, you'll actually see us start to roll out this new branding out on social media and really lean into our mission of improving global financial well-being and help people go from just dreaming of a better financial future to actually taking steps to realize that dream. And so the way that we've approached this realignment to our brand is using a technique that Andrew and I picked up at the conference that I referenced earlier. And it's this content pairing framework. So keeping in mind what we kind of talked about with Nike, as well as this content pairing framework, where we're telling a story over a series of posts. We're telling a story that fall into 3 different post types. So within these we have one large campaign, and we have stories that we're telling within the campaign. And each post within the story, each individual story, there's different types. And so the 3 types are conceptual, strategic, and tactical. So the first one, conceptual, means that we're addressing that what and why behind Ostrich. So some of the things that I talked about when you look at the high level of the emotions that we want to drive. So this includes our belief that emotions tend to hold us back from financial success, that everyone has the ability to create better, wealthier life for themselves, that personal finance doesn't have to be complicated, right? And so that's what the conceptual types of posts address. The second type of post that we've got is a strategic one. And so this is sharing the methods, the processes, the knowledge that you need to improve your finances. And so this is where strategy comes into play, right? The strategy of how to go from having your head in the sand to being on a path to living a richer life, both literally and figuratively. And the third bucket or type of post is tactical. And so tactical posts are step-by-step how-tos that someone can go implement right away. They're action-oriented posts that encourage the flock to stop what they're doing and actually go take this action to improve your finances now. So each type of content serves its own unique purpose that encourage the user to engage in different ways, take different actions, but all support that brand ethos and align with our brand, right? And so when we post a conceptual post, we're looking for different performance metrics than when we post a tactical one, right? Tactical one, I want to see people go click through resources, go actually probably off platform, off of wherever they're engaging to go do something, right? So that's what we want to see. Whereas when we think of the conceptual, the strategic, we're looking more at engagement metrics, right? Are people responding to the content that we're putting out? Are they engaging with it? And so that helps us better identify beyond the, oh, I got 500 likes or 20 likes or however many you're at, and I got a couple comments, like going beyond the superficial level for what's the purpose for each post in each type of content that you're putting out, while still having it align with the overarching vision and mission of your brand. And so this new content framework that I've been talking about is around the Biggest Money Mistakes campaign. And so that's the campaign that we're running, the series that we're running, so to speak. And we're going to be sharing different stories, unique stories from people, and sharing the mistakes that people have made financially. We're going to also be sharing our own, obviously. I'm not going to ask other people to just share theirs and be quiet about that. But the aim is to really break down some of these taboos about talking about finances and to do it in a fun and engaging way. And so we'll actually project out how these mistakes would have turned out if someone would have taken a different action. We, at the beginning, engage folks to kind of guess, how big of a mistake do you think this is? And give actionable tactical steps that people can take to avoid this mistake for themselves. And so that's a key piece of this campaign. In addition, we would love it if you are interested in participating. There's ways that you can actually share and participate. So you'll see that on social media, especially if you go to Instagram, which is where we're going to kind of home base this campaign. You'll see instructions on how to actually participate. We'd love it if you would share your own story, and we're happy to feature you in that story, reshare your journey as well. And so to participate, make sure that you follow Ostrich on Instagram if you don't already. It's at the Ostrich app, THE Ostrich app. You can actually find us under that same username over your favorite social platforms. So follow us there if you prefer. But again, it's just at the THE Ostrich app. And so those are the three main focus areas this past few months. And they're going to continue as we push through the end of Q4 and the end of 2020, these last 6-week period for our OKRs that we have. And it's really crucial to our business to hit these three areas when it comes to growing our team with the right people, right? Who have complementary skill sets and align with our brand vision. Again, the second, the networking aspect, increasing the creative collisions and finding people that are also aligned and can help us achieve our mission and vision. And then the final, again, is the branding and really developing our brand in a deeper, more meaningful way that helps develop the community that we're building. Again, there's so many things that I could share, but regardless, I'm so excited about where Ostrich is headed and the impact that we're having. I am thankful to you, the Silicon Alley community, for being a listener and supporter. If improving finances or helping others improve theirs is really important to you or something that you find interesting, please sign up for Ostrich at getostrich.com. And thank you again so much for being a listener. It means the world to me that you take your time and spend your time with me here on the Silicon Alley podcast. So please be sure to share the podcast with others. That way you have something to talk about besides the news. Please reach out to me at william@financialglass.com. That is my email for this podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions or comments, happy to talk offline. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley podcast. Have the best day ever.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place. Some words got you searching for the bright side over and over.